clap and intro. Here's the clap.
Yep. And here's the intro. Welcome to episode 118 of the Carmudgeon Show. I think
it might be, yeah.
It might be. It's probably
on or about 118 of the Carmudgeon Show.
Whatever.
A product of the Haggerty Podcasts Network, hosted by Jason Cammisa and Derek Tam-Scott. This episode is about the
Ford Mustang.
Haggerty Drivers Club.
No, this episode is about the Ford Mustang in all of its generations, which we recently spent a little bit of time with. Mm-hmm. There's some pretty interesting through lines in the Mustang history that are interesting to people even who aren't Mustang people,
like us,
who don't like to kill pedestrians and cars and coffee.
Yeah, I've never killed a pedestrian anywhere.
I backed over one old lady once in an ice cream shop parking lot.
How was the ice cream?
Melted by the time I stopped applying bandages. But anyway, if you like this kind of content, you can help support it by joining the Haggerty Drivers Club, which offers a whole bunch of different stuff that I don't have on my phone in front of me. So it's like unlimited guaranteed flatbed tows for all of your classic cars. The membership to our award-winning magazine,
access to the valuation tool,
unlimited access to the
access to the valuation tool,
and discounts on really cool shit
and events,
VIP events. Yep.
Yes.
There's a link below. So if you want to click and join, go right the fuck ahead, because we have to talk about Mustangs.
Yes, and away we go. Refrigerador. Okay, so I have three favorite words in Spanish now. Deshumidificador. Refrigerador.
Y otorrinolaryngologo.
Yes, the ENT.
Yes. Do you actually speak Spanish? Or
No, I don't speak Spanish. You have told me those other ones before. But Spanish I do not speak.
But how did you know what an otorrinolaryngologo was?
Isn't it obvious?
I don't think. Look, the joke is that anyone watching this is going to be like, he probably mispronounced it. I don't speak Spanish either. I mean, burrito al pastor con extra cilantro is fine, but yeah, how is otorrinolaryngologo actually a word?
I don't know. There's a lot of stuff like that in German where they just remove spaces and create.
But that's otorhinolaryngologist.
Yeah.
A laryngologist. I'm not a doctor. I don't speak any language. Anyway.
That's neither here nor there. We are having a Carmudgeon show. At this very moment, it's unfolding. It's today episode about...
Wait. I'm still stuck on
what is today's
neither
episode?
Here nor there. So I always go back to a George Carlin comedy routine where he was like, are we there yet? Well, how could we be there if we're still here? But if you say it's neither here nor there, that means it doesn't exist.
No, there is a specific locale and here is a specific locale and there's a lot of space in between.
So it's... Okay. But so George Carlin is still correct. Are we there yet? Well, how could we be there when we're still here?
Yes.
Once we get there, we will no longer be here.
And until there and here converge and become one and the same.
There and here. But they can't. Because you're not like, Derek, why are
over
you...
there?
Why are
there
over there, but this is here.
But that's a very... Jesus, we should proceed with car content.
Fine, Mustangs. So we spent a lot of time last week. So first of all, we have to insult our audience about a couple things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the last week's episode was the first week that... 2 weeks ago was the first week that Jake edited the episode. Jake is our new team member. He's fucking awesome. I sent him some inspiration videos for like, could just make us laugh in the edit. And he did all the weird zoom ins and clips of you being all like butthurt driving some convertible because you're like, I hate sun, I hate wind, I hate fun.
Which I stand by. Yes, fun is miserable.
Yeah.
I feel like that witch from Sword in the Stone. Miserable, miserable sunshine. You never saw that? It's my favorite Disney movie. Okay. Anyway.
However, so we got a lot of great comments in there, but then reading through the comments is always fun because people are so upset that the clocks on the wall are not synced.
So we fixed it by removing the clocks from the wall.
Unfortunately, we also removed the paint
from the wall
with the glue that held the mounting for the clocks. So I think they're framed out. I think we moved everything around so they're framed out. So if there's problems with framing in this episode, it's your fault. All of you collectively for bitching about our clocks.
Yes.
The truth is we don't care what time it is. We just care when we started, so we know like, oh, are we an hour and 20 minutes into an episode, or only 4 minutes and it's boring?
Pull the plug.
Yeah. The other thing is that people are bitching that there's no cars in the background. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh, when you guys were at ECME, there were cars in the background, and that was more fun. Great. You know what wasn't fun? Loud Italian people running through the background, making a lot of noise and dropping shit. So I think we've come up with a solution.
Oh.
And I've brought cars for the foreground.
Oh, God.
How about a Tonka truck Bronco?
Is this a Bronco? The face to me looks like well, the grill is not right for a Jeep, but the lights look kind of like a Jeep. I don't know. It's a mystery flare side truck.
I bought that as a spare, as a prop for the Bronco Revelations episode that no one ever watched.
That's okay. Apparently people don't watch truck content on the car internet because my Range Rover episode did shit also.
Well, no one cares about Range Rover, but everyone watched the Raptor R video.
Oh, really?
Here, have an Infinity.
That's not an Infinity.
Okay, we use these as props. Oh, a Volvo. But you know what these things do? They go and hit the soundboard, which is probably going to cancel it. Anyway, so for all of you people who are bitching that there are no cars in this episode, I have solved that by putting, for those of you listening on podcast providers, model cars on the table that we can play with.
They're not even good ones.
What do you mean?
I collect 118s.
They're Tesla model. Okay, another prop that I had to order at the last second when I finished the script, like the day we were filming. And I'm like, I need 15 identical white cars that I can print out labels and stick on. And Amazon to the rescue, but they're all Tesla Model S's. But they light up. Look, it's cool.
Okay.
Anyway.
Mustang.
So last week, we did 2 Q&A episodes in a row, which we wouldn't have normally done, but scheduling was difficult. So we did 2 Q&As, and then we did the...
one was a continuation of the other, which we didn't finish.
Because we had
so many
really good cues. And then we did a random number generator episode that we had banked. And that's a quickie apology for doing 3 sort of out of the ordinary episodes in a row. But
people like the Q&As.
Oh,
people like all of those, actually.
They did, yeah. But it's just, normally we try to space those things out.
Yes.
And we were just very busy filming down in Southern California last week, which is, as you watched,
some weeks ago.
Yeah. I just got back 2 days ago and I'm still zonked. But we calculated, I did 170 hours of work in a week and a bit. And
a week is 168 hours? Isn't a week 168 hours?
I don't even know. All I know is it was 4 1/4. It was 10 days. 4 1/4 work weeks in 10 days. And that's what I do. Look what you guys make me do to suffer. I love it, but usually at the end of it, we're all like cross-eyed, don't know where we are.
You certainly work hard.
Thank you. You worked hard too. You were fixing cars that I broke and cleaning up and all kinds of stuff. So thank you for your help.
Yes, it is my pleasure.
Also, you were driving fast cars.
Doing my best.
So as you guys are now going to get a spoiler alert, I have an Icons episode of Mustang Dark Horse coming up. And I think that car's pretty significant for a number of reasons. You'll learn soon.
When you watch the episode.
When you watch the episode, damn it, because I'm not telling you the secrets. But we also have a Cooter, Camisa's Ultimate Drag Race Replay episode with Dark Horse. And that we got a little silly. I think we were maybe a little heat stroked.
Oh?
Yeah. I cry a lot in the episode, and there's mascara running. And
yes, that is true.
A fucking allergic reaction to the makeup remover, which made me look like I had been punched in the face. It was fun. It's always fun. However, in the process, we both, I think, drove a bunch of Mustangs that we never driven.
Yes, that's true.
I think it is very difficult to overstate the cultural and business importance of the Mustang. And I'm going to defer to you for a second because I haven't shut up.
Okay, so the Mustang came out in 1964. And after the world, this has been covered elsewhere, right? There's somewhere where you played the Secretary's car ad.
Yeah,
right.
That was so Mustang GT500 Icons. That was for ECME.
Yes,
but it was.
So the car was based on the Ford Falcon, and this is part of the miniaturization of American cars that had the moving downsizing of American cars that happened starting around 1960. So the Corvair came out from GM. And then Ford responds with the Falcon, which is small by American standards, large by global standards car that was meant to sort of segment the market. And I said 1964 was when the Mustang came out because that is when boomers are reaching driving age, and so they're looking for a vehicle that makes a statement of identity and that has coolness, but is also like affordable. And that's the role of the Mustang. They took the guts of the Falcon and then they packaged it into a way that was much more exciting. And it drove one Detroit baker to claim that his hotcakes were selling like Mustangs. In the period. So
that's good.
It was a commercial success from the get-go.
It was more than a commercial success.
It was a phenomenon.
Yeah. So 681,000 Mustangs sold in the first model year. There is nothing in our market today that sells in that number other than pickup trucks. Mm-hmm. They're about 1 million a piece. And think about this. They have 10 different engines, 4 different transmissions, 5 different drive lines, 2-wheel drive, this, that, the other thing, extended bed. This is one car in 1.5 configurations with a couple engines, and that's it. Far less of a diverse offering than Ford has with all of their F products, right?
Okay, yes, but there were lots of different flavors of Mustang. Right. It was open and closed, different transmissions, 3 body styles. So
right at first?
Fastback came out quite early.
Quite early? I thought it was a year later.
Yeah.
But so 681, I mean, this is nuts. So in the video, I put together a list of current manufacturers who all combined sell less a year than Mustang. So it's like 20 major names. Mm-hmm. But the other part of that is that the whole thing was bullshit, right? The whole car was fake.
Yes, it wrote a check that it didn't cash in terms of it promised performance and excitement. And, you put a 289 in it and it is exciting for sure, but it's not a sports car. But Americans don't know what a sports car is anyway at that point, so it's kind of immaterial.
That's an interesting point. They didn't know. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is, the Falcon base had absolutely no sporting pretense whatsoever. I mean, this was a compact economy car, and the 289 is a V8, and that was that was the hot engine option to begin with. I just drove one for the first time for this.
Oh, you'd never driven a first generation Mustang?
I'd only ever driven a 67 GT500 with twin superchargers on it, which is very different kind of animal. Yeah. And friends of mine own this car. It's a beautiful brown convertible,
Ember
glow. And I just thought, oh my God, who the fuck buys a convertible Mustang? I rescind that eye roll. That is exactly the body style you want. Automatic, convertible, beautiful. And the thing is such a rolling piece of art inside and out. The commitment to the interior design with like horses embossed on the vinyl. And just like the cutest little day-night mirror I've ever seen. The thing was a piece of jewelry. Yeah. And so no wonder it sold like...
Yeah, it was
Mustangs.
Genuinely stylish. It was an economy car that was genuinely stylish, and there was no like feeling of... I don't know, compromising or giving up on stuff, because normally when you got a car that wasn't large, you felt like you were giving up something. Right. And they sort of leaned into that sort of, let's make it small because it has sporting intent or appears to have sporting intent, which it didn't, but it at least had that image. And that was what made people be like, okay with having a smaller, cheaper car.
And this is Iacocca at his best, right? So Lee Iacocca is the one that sort of came up with the idea of making a sports car out of a car that was never a sports car. So it's bullshit, right? But it's also brilliant because he took what was a humdrum driving economy car and made it so sexy with the long hood and the short deck and the beautiful styling and of course an optional V8 that it didn't matter that it was bullshit. It worked, right? It got everyone's attention and no one felt like, oh, I'm driving a shitty rental car.
Well, and nobody knows what a sports car is anyway, so everybody's none the wiser. Almost everybody. I mean, right. Sports car people started to use them once Shelby got a hold of them, but that was a comprehensively re-engineered car. Structurally, like the entire drive line, the suspension was all redone to make that.
There was a quote that I quoted in that Shelby GT500 icons, and it was from Carroll Shelby himself, and he said, "You can't make a racehorse out of a mule," right? And so that was his challenge in making that original GT350. A car that was raceworthy because there was nothing sporty about that car at all. So it's funny because I just always saw those original cars and thought, like, they were stunningly beautiful. I never really spent time interacting with them. So stunningly beautiful is surface level. Once you get in the thing, like you realize it's the depth of the styling, right? Nothing is cost cut. Everything was beautiful.
To our
simple,
eyes.
right? It's a simple car, but it was just so beautifully executed that you must have felt rich driving that car.
Yeah.
Right. Everything was a piece of art. And so I thought sporty. And then you drive it and the steering is the most overboosted steering I think I've among the most overboosted.
It's also like 744 turns lock to lock.
It is over 5. This one that I drove.
There was a scene where I was maneuvering the car and it was the first time I had done that, and I ended up pointed in a different direction entirely from where I anticipated I would be because of the steering ratio.
Yeah, just trying to self-center it after a turn, you had better be helping. And my hands broke the speed of sound just trying to twirl the wheel. So yeah, no sport at all, but what a unbelievable experience, especially being in Palm Springs where everything is just so beautiful. Top down, just cruising along at 1200 RPM. Engine doesn't sound like much. But it's, it's a little burbly V8, but you kind of
But that's also the thing about those cars that people like, is that there's a lot of ways to configure those things to change, to dial the experience in that you want.
Yeah, and nothing like a GT500 that later car, which is effectively the same car underneath, just made slightly bigger to fit the big block, right?
Yes, that's true of the 67 GT500, less so of the 65 GT350.
Yeah, so 65 GT350 was not 350 of anything. I love this.
Yes, we did. We had an entire episode about this, I think, early on.
And then the 500 was also not 500 of anything, but the 350 was a stripped out track special.
In 65.
The 500, and it became gradually less sort of homologation car crazy.
Yeah, there's a big difference between 65 and 66 technically, and that's why there's a big value difference between 65 and 66, even though they look largely alike.
Right, so the 65 was a serious track car that was miserable on the road by all, contemporary road tests. 66 got less so, and then the GT500 that came out in 67 was a big motor. And what I think the learning on Shelby's part was, people don't want a race car for the street.
No.
What they want is the appearance of a race car, which means something that's stupid fast.
Yeah, and the 500 is a big block version, and there was also a small block version available in 67, 68, which was the 350. Mm-hmm. So the 350 continued.
Okay, so when it came time to replace the first gen Mustang, the Falcon bodied Mustang, so we have the first and second generation basically based on that platform, what had happened?
How late are we talking? Are you talking about like in the 70s?
Yeah, that was the replacement for the
Mustang II.
Yeah,
so they extracted over like a decade out of the first one almost, and then it got it was Pinto based, wasn't it?
Yeah. So this is the thing,
the new economy car.
Yeah.
So in some sense, there's continuity with the Falcon, which is to say, we'll take our shitty economy car and we'll sex it up.
Oh. So this is a tough one, because what I'm trying to do in the icons is celebrate Mustang, and everyone shits all over Mustang II, because Mustang II,
How was the Mustang II? I wasn't there for that day.
I'll tell you in a second. No, I'm going to tell you right now. Not a Mustang in any sense. There's nothing about it that's Mustang, except
it's a sexed up economy car.
There's no sex in there. I don't think that's a pretty car.
What did they do to it? Tarted up?
Not even that. It's barely disguised from a Pinto. But here's where it's a real Mustang. It sold like the Dickens. And the thing to remember is that, so Ford sold almost, I think it was 1.1 million of the things in only a couple of years. The brilliance behind the Mustang II was that Ford saw gas prices going crazy and foresaw the energy crisis and thought, okay, well, the Mustang's big, heavy, and thirsty, and we need to have something that young people will buy that will compete with these burgeoning imports that were getting good fuel economy. So they moved Mustang from their compact platform to their subcompact platform, which was Pinto, and gave it a 4-cylinder, which is completely not okay. I mean, I guess there's still a 4-cylinder Mustang, right? There's almost always been, but that was kind of it. Like, there was no high performance.
Hold on a second. So the Fox was available with a 4-cylinder,
Fox-Body, yeah.
And then they never 4-cylindered again until the EcoBoost came out. So that's like a 25 year.
There was a bit of a gap. Yeah, I don't think there was an SN95 or S1. No, it wasn't four-cylinder. They were V6s.
There were always, the base model was V6.
But yeah, but you could have the base model when you had the V8.
Yes,
because
correct.
I mean, Mustang
there was always a V8 and a not V8.
Mustang always just means V8 rear drive and redneck at the wheels.
To enthusiasts, but the actual, like if you to an accountant at Ford, it mean those are like a smaller portion than the base model cars.
Yeah, but the Halo is a V8.
Yes.
Yeah, it wasn't available. The Mustang II was not available with V8 at first. It was four-cylinder only, and it was not a sporting four-cylinder. It was the Pinto's 2.3 liter. So that car to drive was, my grandmother had a Pinto when I was a kid, and I have not been in one since probably 1982. And I got in and I'm like, oh, it's grandma's Pinto. It smelled the same. It's the same dash, except this one had a tachometer. Or maybe, I don't know. I don't think it had a tachometer because it probably only revs to 3,500 RPM. If there's anything sporty about the original one, all of that is dead in the Mustang II. But it was the right car for the right time. It sold well because it got good gas mileage, and it was what, quote unquote, the people needed. Right? It still continued to sell in bad times. But that's the least Mustang of any Mustang ever made.
Yes, values reflect that. Like, what is the most desirable Mustang II? I know nothing about those cars. I like, did they made a V8 version of it
later on?
They did,
allegedly. Apparently, I don't know. I mean, the thing is,
we're well over our skis now because we don't know.
When you're doing an episode on the history of Mustang, it's kind of important to point out that this car, part of the Mustang brand, we think V8 rear drive, whatever. Part of that brand is selling a shitload of cars.
Yeah. And
Mustang II sold a shitload of cars. So it really was a success. But at some point, someone realized at Ford, like, oh, hold on. That's not what people expect when they think Mustang. So then the Fox-Body.
Yeah, but it took them a while, too, because then the Fox-Body hot one for a while, the top of the line was the SVO, right? Which is a...
Yeah, but I don't think it was all that.
There was a turbo four-cylinder, which is like very discontinuous.
But there still is now.
Yes.
I mean, true. There's always
but it
the
wasn't
base model.
Hot car. The hot car, was the turbo four-cylinder.
Yeah.
Early Fox.
But remember that early Fox-Body year. So now we're talking 80, 79? No, Fox-Body came out in 79.
It did?
Uh-huh. I believe so. But we're talking just emerging from, or just beginning to emerge from the doldrums of the emissions choked malaise era and fuel crises. So sure, they're experimenting with turbo four cylinders to try to get fuel economy up in the same way that same reason they're doing EcoBoost now. But they had a V8, and gradually over the first, I guess, 8 years of
carbureted V8.
Yeah, but everything was carbureted. I mean, these were cheap cars and shitty. They were just weren't.
Not a premium car.
Not a 911, right?
Yes.
But they gradually got their performance back. They got back up to 200 horsepower with the V8. And then the 87 to 93 Fox bodies were the
Arrow nose.
Flush
headlight.
And 225 horsepower, I think. And that car, okay, so we had one there. Belongs to a great guy named Craig, who's got a YouTube channel and does stuff. And he was really cool to lend us the car sight unseen. He just put it on a truck for us. And it's cammed to filth. I have never driven a Fox-Body, but that car was the poster of my childhood. Everyone who was hot drove a Mustang. Yeah. So like anyone who everyone wanted to fuck was driving a 5.0. And then if it was a guy, there were 15 girls lined up to get in the car. It was just the ultimate in sex appeal, which is so funny because we were talking to our producer on set who's 15 or 16 years younger than I am. And she was like, disgusting. Like everyone who drove one of these cars was disgusting.
So they were washed out in high school.
Exactly. Because the cars were 15-year-old $500 pieces of shit, but they were new-ish when I was in high school. And the first time I rode in one, like my mind melted because it was so fast. But the sound of that car is really the automotive soundtrack of my childhood. And Craig's car was fucking ridiculous. Just one of the best acoustic experiences I've ever had in any car.
Yeah.
Ever.
And I love that it has bologna slice exhausts, but they're small. You're like, how can so much noise be coming out of such small exhaust tips?
While making so little power.
Yes. It's not
in his defense,
fast by modern standards.
Well, in his defense, he said it's down about 100 horsepower. because he tuned it and put the cams in it, but and a different MAF in it, but ordered the bigger injectors that the tune needed, but couldn't get them in time. So he was running them on the old injectors, so it was running the wrong programming for the MAF, and everything was all fucked up. And so he warned me well in advance, and it was just a matter of timing. So absolutely nothing he did wrong. But I did have to watch air fuel because it was not fueling enough. Very, very lean.
It was running lean.
But I honestly wouldn't care if that thing did 0 to 60 in 22 minutes. I mean,
just to listen to
just to hear the noise of that thing and the response. It wasn't just the noise. Cross-plane V8s are lazy down low at 2,000 RPM. You got to give them a whack of throttle to get them to wake up, and it's and this thing was like zippy like a friggin' Lamborghini. Just fucking magic.
It was just, it was very handsome. It was very evocative also. And when you think about like the price of those and the experience you get, it makes you really sort of just be like, why, is X thing so much more money? Because it's just such an overwhelming experience. It's a classic case of, car doesn't need to be fast to be entertaining. It's why we like old cars.
Right. Or good.
Yes.
In that case. And
objectively it wasn't good.
No. I mean, I was driving it around the track to get footage, to get coverage of it. And every time I went around a left-hand bend, goo from the headliner fell through the missing dome light hole. And by the time I got out of the car, it was completely covered in like shitty polystyrene.
Yes.
Didn't care. Just couldn't stop laughing.
It's the classic old car experience.
Yeah. Nothing fits on those cars. No body panels fit. Nothing. Every piece of
I finally learned about halfway through the shoot, the trick for opening the driver's door is you got to tickle it just so. This typical old car stuff.
But old bad car. I mean, again, I kind of want one now. Like it was just.
Oh, I had that reaction with the first generation Mustang. I may have gone and looked on Bring a Trailer at first generation Mustangs when I got home. I did, but every time I think about buying one of those, I'm like, no, I have to get a Galaxy. I want the big car. I want the big car with the big block.
But you live in San Francisco where it doesn't.
It's fit. 5 inches longer than a Mercedes S-Class.
Yeah.
210 inches long. And the S-Class is 205.
You're not going to fit a 200. And the width. That's the thing. It's not even the length. It's the width. Where are you going to drive this thing?
Anywhere I like. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It'll make me happy.
Okay. Whatever makes you happy. That Fox-Body was a magic experience. And the performance numbers that thing laid down brand new were just
especially on a per dollar basis.
It cost 1/3 as much as an E30 M3. 1/3 as much, an LX 5 liter, and outperformed the E30 in every single performance metric. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 0 to 60, quarter mile, matched its top speed, outgripped it, and outbraked it. All while being terrible the entire time. But man, I want one.
Yeah. You see why they sold so well and why the E30 M3 did not. Especially because then you get in the E30 M3, which we also had there. And the experience of that. Randy Popes was trying to get me to like the E30 M3. He was really trying. He likes those cars. I think
because he's a race car driver. And they're magic on track.
Yes. Well, he was trying to get me to like it, and I just couldn't get there. I was trying. But, I mean, I have never driven one of those cars in anger, to be fair.
Okay.
I've probably driven 3 of them at this point, but I have never driven one hard in it at the limit. So
an M3 is I don't want to call it magical because that engine is never magical, but it is a 9. It's a solid 9 out of 10 on a track.
Here is the question that I posed to Randy, though, is that if you get a 911 from the same era, which is, in today's market comparable price-wise, the 911, I'm always having a good time no matter how fast I'm going. There is so much feedback from the chassis and the motion that we talk about, from being rear-engined and the steering feel and the noise that the engine makes. Like, it is a more enjoyable car a much higher percentage of the time than an E30 M3.
I would say that if you took out the engine component of that whole thing, I don't think I would agree with you. Because while the 911's engine is buzzy and fizzy and alive and...
Yeah, but think of the steering. The steering in the 911 is so much better than the steering in the E30 M3 when you're just cruising around.
But the M3's not bad. It's just slow. Yeah, but it's not bad. It still feels some. I would rather look at an E30 M3 than look at a 911.
Torsion bar suspension and the motion and all that stuff. Yeah. Like, it's no comparison for me.
I think there overall is no comparison, but most of that, a good portion of that comes from the engine.
And to me, it's the whole car.
Yeah. My problem with the M3 is only that you can get a 325i.
Yeah.
There's you want to talk about no contest? No contest. One of the best engines of its time to one of the worst engines of its time. And, 1/10 of a second quicker to 60.
Yeah. I agree with that for sure.
But yeah, and to have a Mustang be able to keep up with an M3 at 1/3 of the price is pretty damning for the M3 value proposition back in 1988.
Which is why they sold so poorly.
Yeah. Well, also because the 325i was literally 35% cheaper.
Yes, there were two extremely compelling options you would buy before you bought the E30 M3, unless you were like individual throttle bodies and dual overhead cams. And
if you were tracking it, maybe the additional 40% or 50%, it was 50%. It was like 27 to 38 or something, $1,000. It was a huge amount of money, a surcharge for the M car. Worth it now to look at if you don't want to drive.
Yeah, I don't know.
But then, okay, so Fox-Body. So the best part about the Fox-Body was that, not the best part, my favorite part of the story of the Fox-Body is that it was due to be replaced by a front-wheel drive Mazda.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of fun on the episode about dealing with this situation. But the car that eventually became the Ford Probe was the 4th generation Mustang.
And however blasphemous that may now seem, it's worth pointing out that it's actually exactly continuous with everything else the Mustang had ever been up until that point. It was basically the Mustang II-ification of the Fox-Body, if you will, which is to take the sort of next direction of economy car and sex it up and then sell it in large numbers, which was the original intent. But at that point in the 80s, I think not in the grips of the fuel crisis, there was a significant response from the consumer market about that.
Well, yeah, I think you can cut power a little bit when everything is cutting power, i.e. when, fuel prices are through the roof and a Corvette has 90 horsepower or whatever the Corvette's low was, like 125 or something. But what you can't do in the 1980s is when everyone else is, getting faster and faster. Finally, we're coming out of this fuel crisis and now you have all the 16 valve 4 cylinders. You can't.
Not to mention, look at IROC Z in the direction they're going, where they're just like.
Well, hold on. GM also was planning on making the Camaro front wheel drive. But if you look at the time, everybody was looking at fuel efficient aerodynamic shapes, and so you had Honda made a CRX,
Ford Taurus-ification of the automotive landscape.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking more like Honda CRX, right? Honda took the Civic, put a 2-door body on it, and the CRX, by the way, wasn't a sports car.
No, it was a mileage maker.
It was 50 mile per gallon commuter car, along with the Pontiac Fiero. But, the guys at Ford and sort of everyone else would have seen these imports that are going to front wheel drive and capturing the market. And you think, okay, well, there's a packaging and fuel economy advantage. You put a very fuel efficient body on it, and it's the Mustang of the future. And man, did the Karens come out and write letters. And Karens and Kens, what are the male Karens? Kens? Chad, whatever. They started writing letters. And if you look at Mustang Fox-Body sales numbers, when the magazines started reporting that the next Mustang was front wheel drive, the sales numbers for Fox-Body Mustangs went through the roof.
This is very much like what happened with Porsche at the 928 and the 911. Where the replacement car, people learn that it's existing, and then they're like, "Wah!" And then they go buy the old car because they're like, this is the way to go.
I didn't realize that happened with 911s.
Well, the 911 sales never died. That's why they never put it out of production, because the car kept selling so well, even though they stopped developing the car.
E39 5 Series best year was its last year, and its best 3 months were its last 3 months, where when everyone saw the E60.
Yeah. So when people have that reaction to the replacement, they vote with their wallets for the old car. And fortunately, Ford was responsive enough to the marketplace to not actually ever end up axing the car, and they just had a parallel. They're not even that parallel. I mean, that's the thing. And at this time when American car companies were so threatened by the incoming imports that they were just really worried about how are we going to respond to this. And they're doing a lot of stuff like Escort, the American Escort, where they're trying to do what Japanese companies do, but often not doing as good a job as the Japanese. And that, this was a segment of the market where Ford could be like, no, we're just going to lean into our value, our key differentiator, which is like the stuff that Japanese cars simply do not do, which is V8. Live rear ends and one camshaft for a 2-bank engine V8, obnoxious noise where gas is 90 cents a gallon or whatever gas cost back then. I have no idea, but I'm sure it was nothing. Yeah, $1 a gallon gas. So, it was actually became a differentiator that they were smart enough to respond to and lean into.
And here's the thing. Probe was fine. First of all, the Probe GT got a turbo 4-cylinder, and they were quick.
Although not as quick as the Ford Mustang. The kind soul who lent us the Ford GT, the Probe GT, had the road and track issue where they did a comparison test between the Probe GT and the Mustang. And it was interesting to read the article because the performance numbers weren't that different from each other. Mm-hmm. But the first sentence of the concluding paragraph was, a replacement for the Mustang, it is not. Referring to the Probe GT.
Because I think it was $3,000 more comparably equipped. And yeah, it was a big difference. 13 to 16 or something was the price differential. So the Probe was dramatically more expensive and posted similar but not better performance numbers. But they sold, here we go again with the Mustang, they sold a shitload of Probes. It was a good looking car, especially that second generation. And it was reliable because it was a Mazda, and it was quick, and it did everything kind of well. It's just, but man, did Ford learn a lesson. Well,
there was space for both of them, fortunately.
Yeah. And that's pretty cool. A lot of other car companies wouldn't have listened. They said,
they would if they had been German. They would have just been like, well, actually, that's not true because Porsche didn't do this. But
yeah, but certainly all the other car companies have. I mean, BMW does one study in the UK that finds that 50% of all 1 Series drivers didn't know whether their car was front wheel drive or rear wheel drive. So that convinced some Germans somewhere that then it doesn't matter. And so BMW threw away its entire identity.
Yeah.
Because of one fucking study. So yeah.
Can you imagine how cool it would be if that car had continued to persist, a hatchback 1 Series that was rear wheel drive today?
I'd have one.
Well, no, because think about it, would be hideous and it would be dynamically miserable.
Yeah, that's true. But if they hadn't gone that path of like not understanding, so the point there about Mustang is that Ford understood what Mustang meant to customers, and we're going to find a way to make that work in a new world. BMW is trying to dictate the rules of the new world and making excuses about drive-by noise and fuel economy and all the other shit that everyone else somehow finds a way around. So the Fox-Body's platform was continued. I think there were 20 cars made or 23 cars made on the Fox-Body platform for 17 years or some outrageous number.
Wait, so what is the full gamut? Is this Panther too, or is that a separate platform?
That's a separate platform, but this was Fairmont was the, so this is Mercury Zephyr. There was absolutely nothing sporty about any car made on the Fox-Body platform at all, except for the Mustang. And so they did an emergency update for it called the SN95 that launched in 94. And that was the sort of the
emergency. That was like a decade later, right? After the
Probe was 89. No. But yeah, so it was once people started to find out that the Probe was coming, they kept the Fox-Body Mustang in production, but did an emergency update to its platform because if you remember, 1994 is a seminal year. It's when dual airbags became required. Right. And so there was no way they were going to fit dual. I'm assuming that was the reason why we saw SN95 in 94.
I do remember when that car came out, everyone like sort of lost their shit because it was so evocative of the first generation Mustang, so consciously evocative. It was, I would say relatively early in that retro trend that emerged in the 90s. This is what also leads to the new Thunderbird or the new Beetle or
all the Freeman Thomas, J. Mays designs that are
really retro, like evocative of the it's responding to baby boomers as they get older, basically. And so that the Mustang was, I would say, one of the earlier designs that really keyed into that, which is reflective of the Mustang's role as an innovative product that reads the consumer preferences and market well.
Yeah. And it debuted with a 4.6.
Yeah, the 4.6 modular engine. Right. Yeah, and a V6.
Did it debut with that, or did that come later?
I thought it arrived with it, but I don't know those
Either
cars.
Way, later on, they had a 4.6.
Yes.
They had actually the Cobra R version with independent rear suspension.
Yeah,
which is kind of crazy to think
that they just completely re-engineered the back of the car in a way that I think
it bolted into the
consumers wouldn't. Yeah, but to have this is like when you ask these sort of car trivia questions where you're like, what platform car was available with front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, and all wheel drive?
Is there one?
It's not a car. It's the Ford Transit
Ford
Connect.
Transit, right. And that's not only its longitudinal or transverse engine.
Yeah, which is just outrageous. But when you have like these substantial packaging changes where you're like, no, it's integral to the car. It's a different car if you change those things. You're like, no, it looks exactly the same, but it's independent rear suspension.
Yeah.
Which, I mean,
it's pretty nuts.
Triumph did that also with the TR4, to be fair.
And then the next generation was S197. And this one I find really fascinating because this was effectively Lincoln LS / Jaguar S-Type / Thunderbird, but without the independent rear suspension.
This is the one that came out in like 04, 05? Or are you talking about the one that looks like a facelift of the one that came out in 94?
The one that looks like a facelift of the one that... No, hold on. The first pretty one. The first like retro pretty square.
Yeah, okay. So that's the one that came out in 05.
Oh, God, don't ask me years. I know it's S197. That's all I know.
Okay.
But that car was very interesting because it moved to a luxury car platform for the first time. Like, remember, it'd always been an economy
Certainly
car.
Not inside the car.
You were a little bit tough on that one. So that is...
I remember this because my ex was looking at a GT500 when they came out. And we went we opened the door and we're just like, and then walked away from the car because the door panel is just this vast expanse of cheap looking plastic. And as soon as I opened the door of the Boss 302, I looked at that and I was like, whew.
Let me tell you, so Ford, I think...
That's fine. I get that the car is a cheap car.
It's cheap.
And so that's
and
fine.
You're stuck up.
It's acceptable to me. It's just funny that you would say that it's a luxury car platform because my overriding like mental construction of that car is the door panel and how just painfully inexpensive it looks.
Wow. It was Ford.
Yeah, I
Ford
get it. If the car's going to base price at $26,000, whatever it is, like that's what it has to be. But when you're looking at a GT500 and it's $70,000 or whatever it was, they were in 2011. That was always the WRX problem, yeah,
or 911 problem. Now the $350,000. That's not a $350,000 interior. It's a $120,000 interior. But that's neither here nor there. Ford said they saved $5,000 per car by giving it a solid rear axle.
$5,000? That's an absurd number,
right?
Like I feel like if you, how can all of the suspension linkages and differentials?
It's probably not the cost of materials. So live axles are really cheap. So there's a cost of materials plus bushings. Remember, a 5-link rear suspension has 10 bushings on either side.
How much does a bushing cost?
Well, think about it. That you have 20 of them.
How's it going to add up to $5,000?
Well, 20 bushings at $20 a piece is $400 right there. Plus 10 arms is another, let's call that $1,000 in parts right there, right? Their cost versus one bushing. And then you have to have a different differential, mount, carrier, and then also development baked in. And that's probably what it was. It was probably, we can take this old axle and all of these old differentials and just reuse them rather than having to spend millions of dollars for a relatively low volume car that each car has to amortize that development cost. And they said $5,000. I call bullshit.
$5,000.
I think it was $5,000.
That's so many dollars.
Don't quote me on this.
That's so many dollars.
But the best example of the S197 was the Boss 302. That car was magic.
I really enjoyed that car.
That is that car is
the thing about it, which I would say surprised me most, was that it was stock. I was like, how can something this spicy be stock?
It had different mufflers on it, but from the factory, they had side exhaust cutouts, and they were fully. You could open them partially or fully. They were fully open thanks to the owner. And then I think he had Borlas. He had some different mufflers on it. Not relevant because the sound is fucking outrageous once you have those side pipes open. And it had the track key, and this was. I went on the launch of this car at Laguna Seca, and it was a 7,500 RPM, 444 horsepower, kick to the nuts of the M3, and they didn't choose 444. BMW probably didn't choose 444 for the M3 GTS by mistake, right? Although they didn't sell that in the US. That car had.
Are you talking about the F80?
No. I'm talking about the E92. M4 GTS.
Yes, right. Okay.
Which is the orange one, the one that was always in orange for the press cars. But that track key is the stupidest thing ever because you put it in, you turn it on, and then once the bunch of conditions are met, it goes to track idle.
Yes.
And so what it did was use the VVT to give the thing variable valve time to give the thing a tremendous cam lobe. And I will never forget asking the engineers, how the hell you guys got that through emissions? And they're like, well, you can't, it won't do it for too long because it's building up hydrocarbons that are stored in the cat. And then every once in a while, we got to do a couple tricks to really heat it up to burn that shit off. But that I just love. I mean, I love that level.
They know exactly what consumers want, and then they just deliver it in because they are the same, one and the same, right? Exactly. The car is developed by people who are themselves.
It's a line in the video about the Dark Horse was that Mustang is not engineered by people who take the train to work. Like it's just so obvious. Yeah. Like give me a red key that gives the thing a lopey idle and makes more noise and does stupid shit. I'm in. Yeah. That car was a magic handler too. It sounded so much better than the Dark Horse. And I hate to say that, but that old motor sounded way better than the Coyote. And handling, it was just a pussycat. I remember from back in the day, it was pussycat. If you had a curb, didn't like that because it was a non-independent rear. But you have not driven an S550 other than, so the car that replaced that, so last gen Mustang, except the GT500, right?
350 also.
Oh, 350.
My brother owned both, actually.
That's right. Does he still own the 500? Because he had a kid. That happens.
He has a Rivian now.
Oh, okay.
And a Miata.
Okay, that's a perfect two-car solution.
Yeah, Miata. Rivian plus Miata.
And you could put the Miata in the Rivian and it wouldn't even notice because it's so light. I love that S550. I thought that was a really good Mustang.
Yeah.
Came out of the box way too soft, way too quiet. The original GTs were
neutered.
But Ford got the message really quickly and then wound up getting that thing. First of all, it was on its own bespoke platform for the first time in the history of Mustang. It was its own thing. Now, that platform was supposed to be used for other things, but because the world's ending, it wasn't.
Oh, really? What was it going to be used for?
I think it was going to be used for a series of front engine, rear wheel drive, luxury sedans and SUVs. So Explorer, for example, back was all going to be on that platform, if I remember correctly.
The 197 probably got they got that platform too because there were no other rear wheel drive platforms left in the Ford arsenal. So they're like, well, it's the only rear-wheel drive platform we have, so here you go.
Yep. Yeah. But S550 is something that even M3, M4 aren't. It's its own thing. It's not it's not baked in compromises for something else. And the
baked in compromises would be the base price.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I see
the compromise that they make is that it has to be something they can sell with a 4-cylinder engine to rental car companies for $26,000.
But at the same time, that GT500 was one of the best, I should say, one of the best sports cars ever. I mean, 760 horsepower rear-wheel drive, put it all down, was a pussycat at the limit, and kept up with a 911 GT3 RS, its contemporary GT3 RS around a racetrack.
For a lap.
For a lap. I mean, they don't overheat that quickly.
Tires. Yeah. The car weighs 1,000 pounds more, and the tire consumption is quite different. My brother had a GT3, and then he had the GT500 afterwards, and he said the cost of running the GT500 as a track car versus the GT3 was much higher because of the tire consumption alone and brakes.
Just the mile per gallon on the 500. I mean, I think we were seeing 2, 3, and 4 on filming. I mean, Coyote just did 4 and change, but the supercharged motor, it's making 760 horsepower out the back of the engine. But remember, it's got to burn 1,000 horsepower ish of fuel. There's 900 horsepower worth of fuel to get that because the supercharger took 150.
It's 150 horsepower. Yeah.
Supercharged engines that flat out are just hideously inefficient.
Yeah.
But the thing that I liked about the 500 is it kept up with the GT3 RS, not just in speed. And it didn't make up for it for any other
in the
dynamic
traditional
lag.
way that American cars have used in the past, which is we're going to fix this with horsepower and we're going to go slower through the corners but faster in the straights, and the lap time's the same.
Yep.
But it's actually like doing it fair and square, aside from the 1,000 pound weight penalty, which
it definitely was faster in a straight line.
Via tires.
Right. It was faster in a straight line, but it had all of the composure to deal with that kind of power.
Yeah, you didn't feel like you were going to die when you were setting a lap in that car.
Yep. And so Dark Horse, I had one here. I had Dark Horse. I'll talk about more of that in the Icons episode. And I had a GT here that I drove around. And I, of course, talked to Thomas from Throttle House because he was like, what? James told me that you like this car. It's a piece of shit. I love my Throttle House boys. we're friends.
However, there's a however coming. Okay.
You said it, not me.
Bring forth the bus.
I'm sorry, Thomas, don't kill me. He was wrong. He was just wrong. Okay, the steering was not, he said the steering was terrible on his car. No, the steering wasn't terrible on the GT. So I had a GT Performance.
This is the black one that you had. You had a black one.
Sure. I never
like a month ago.
Was it black?
Yes.
You're sure.
Yes.
I have no recollection of its color. What I remember, it was manual. It was a GT Performance. I love the interior. I love the blatant copy of BMW, single tombstone with 2 screens in it. And it's down to the vent layout and everything. It's just 100% BMW. But unlike BMW's infotainment, you can figure it the fuck out. Also, unlike BMW's infotainment, it takes about 30 minutes to boot in the morning. So that wasn't perfect. But dynamically, that Getrag transmission felt great because it's a relatively short throw, almost Volkswagen-esque in its sort of ropiness, shift throws, but super easy to operate, felt great going into gears. The motor is the absolute masterpiece and centerpiece of the car.
As it should be for any Mustang buyer who's buying a V8.
It's not the prettiest sound in the world, but my God, it makes so much fucking noise that it just doesn't matter. Plus you can choose loud, way too loud, or holy shit, arrest me loud.
And where else can you choose mega V8 noises these days? There's just not that many places left, especially, without turbos.
What, with that, right. NA with a
manual. I mean, what are those cars?
V8 manual cars. You still can get a Camaro for about another week. I think
Aston
Challenger, Aston.
That's turbocharged.
That is turbocharged 4-liter. There's kind of not much. Magical experience in just daily living with it.
Mm-hmm.
So to Thomas's stuff, the steering on mine wasn't bad. Is it the most communicative in the world? No. Is it any worse than any modern BMW? No, it's better. It had Pirelli P0s on it that had genuinely, and I know I'm going to get a cringe from you and everyone else, less grip than the Michelin Pilot all-season 4s that are on the minivan.
I believe that.
Yeah,
those all-season Michelins are spectacular.
But on a fucking, I'm sorry, minivan with all-season 4s shouldn't be outgripping a Corvette, a Mustang GT Performance. But hey, tire choice. I can't, it is what it is.
Pirelli, they're engineered to degrade, as we know from Formula One.
We made it until 9:41 in the morning on the first day of filming before the first Pirelli laminated.
On the Dark Horse.
Dark Horse.
Yes, right. I noticed those.
Yeah, and took the fender liner with it. I was pretty pissed off about that. We did one launch. And they just say it was 113 degrees later that day, so it was probably already 100. But anyway, I'm not gonna go down the fucking Pirelli rabbit hole. But so the base Mustang I really liked. The drift brake worked perfectly for me. I think the problem with Thomas was saying it was really imprecise and it didn't work consistently. And I went back and watched their video, and I think he was on the gas. They had an automatic for that video, and I think he had his foot on the gas. If you listen, you can hear throttle. And I'm guessing there's a safety feature built in where it won't lock the rear wheels if you have any gas request on it all. In the GT manual, it worked perfectly. I did it a bunch of times in a parking lot around here just to see. It's a quarter of a second behind what you do. So a cable would be a faster, but you learn to sort of map that. Dark Horse is a very different car. Dark Horse is much stiffer. Has magnetorheological shocks also that are stiffer than this is also a performance pack than the GTs. But the front tires go from, I believe, 245s to 305s. Huge. And you feel that
turns in
immediately. Yeah. It also tram lines a little bit, but you feel a much more positive connection.
That's a type of feedback through the steering,
and one that I'm fine with. It doesn't tramline all over the place, but you feel where the tires are going, and I don't have any sort of problem with that.
Agree.
And the Tremec is the regular GTs get a Getrag 5-speed and the 6-speed, and the Dark Horse gets a Tremec 6-speed, which is.
I didn't love rushing that gearbox.
It didn't work for me. I would much prefer the Getrag. Now there's a class action lawsuit against the Getrag and for blowing up early.
Failure. Oh, so they were like, this Getrag's not up to the
very well. The Boss 302. No, hold on. The Mach 1. What the hell was the last one? They all got the previous sort of track packs. All got the Tremec because obviously the
Getrag
wasn't up for it. the gear ratios are so much better on the Tremec because you have a really closely spaced first, second, third, fourth, fifth, and then a huge drop into sixth, which is exactly what I want. A little bit longer than I'd like, but it is what it is.
Everything is.
Yeah. I'm not even going to respond to that ridiculously profane comment, Derek.
You made it profane.
Hold on.
By responding.
Now we're going to bring Jake into this. Jake laughed when you said that, which tells me that I didn't make it profane. You did. Jake is going to become Jake's our new Paolo, so we're going to have to make fun of him over there.
Okay.
Sorry, Jake. Jake drives a Mustang. We should have had him be our special guest this episode.
Yeah. So because since we obviously don't know what we're doing
or talking about, yeah. Anyway, I would take Dark Horse over GT, but that Tremec in that particular car, and we'll see if that's a characteristic thing of that transmission or it was just somebody.
I mean, it could have been a press car that was thoroughly used.
5,000 miles on it. So it was a press car that was thoroughly used, but it would grind if going into second quickly or fourth.
It was not the only car we were drag racing that would grind if shifted quickly. I would say more of the cars that we drag raced did that than didn't, actually.
That is also true. In fact, I think all of them did it. But
the M2 did. The Emira did.
Oh, so we're telling everyone what that episode is?
I guess so. We just did.
Spoiler alert. Yeah. Emira is...
We're not spoiling the results. We're just saying what was present.
The Emira is a fucking nightmare to shift from first to second, even if you do it slowly.
Yeah.
It's because that's an Ison 6-speed manual that was made for diesels. High torque diesels. So it was rated for 400 Newton meters. They're putting 430 through it. So they're already over, but the first to second gear synchro, the second gear synchro was made for 4,500 RPM, not 7,500 RPM. Mm-hmm. And Lotus is very proud to boast that they've replaced the third, fourth, fifth, and sixth gears in the transmission, but still haven't fixed the fucking big problem, which is you can't shift from first to second over 7,000 without a horrible noise.
Mm-hmm. The M2 was reluctant.
The Supra ground also. Supra was a little bit less miserable on the 1-2 shift than the M2 was.
Yeah, the M2 was not a happy camper.
But grind would go in.
Yes, Supra, it would go in. It was just a cringy.
Yeah, you get a and in, and versus the Emira, which would just lock you out. Like you're just not getting in. Sorry, abort. I got good acceleration numbers out of that car though. If you can time it right and beat the synchro.
What if you double clutch?
I did.
And
I did on the 1-2.
It worked.
No.
Good?
No. It's a little bit better, but it's instead of the normal you're losing. That car did I think a 4.2 to 60. 4.1. It was high. It was just about. It was almost a 4.1, so it might wind up correcting to 4.1 to 60, which is quick. It would have been a 3.6 or a 3.7 if you could shift it quickly. But is that what a Lotus is about? Not sure.
No, it's not.
But yeah, the Dark Horse was also reluctant it would just grind second, all the rearward shifts, 1 to 2 and 3 to 4. I didn't grind going to 5th to 6th.
It's not that long of a drag race.
I maxed out 5th.
You did?
Mm-hmm. It's a long runway.
Oh, not a part of the quarter mile.
Yeah, but while we're getting footage, I made sure the gauge went to places. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yep. So moral of the story is I want a Fox-Body motor that's cammed and miserable and angry in something that looks like a Fox-Body.
So you want a Fox-Body car. Interesting. I left being very impressed by the Boss 302, and it also made me want as first half of the 60s Ford as well.
Yeah. That 66
I would be really into having a Mustang were it not for the fact that I have chosen to hitch my horse to the Galaxy train. And no one else.
That's right. Have whatever you want. I mean, that I could have one of those early Mustangs just to have this sort of sedate, relaxing, Palm Spring cruisy driving experience that none of my other cars offers. But the Boss 302 is probably the best Mustang around. I mean, that car had that best sounding. It was just as fast in a straight line as the Dark Horse. Like that's pretty nuts.
Which is impressive considering a decade separates those cars.
Yeah, they were the same speed.
Yeah.
But good looking. I mean, the interior didn't bother me. You were horrified, but
I mean, yeah, that's true. I was. I mean, I know why it's like that, and so it offends me less. But also, you get into like the S550, and you don't have that experience. So,
fair enough.
They could have done. They did do.
Or the S650, which then gives you Fox-Body gauges. If that S650 not only had Fox-Body gauges, but then had a motor that sounded and responded like that Fox-Body motor. Okay, Ford, there's your assignment. Here's my
It's probably illegal.
I have a theory. So the Dark Horse, the new 5-liter, makes 500 horsepower out of a cross-plane crank 5-liter, which is 100 horsepower per liter, which has only ever once been beat. I don't remember who the fuck did it. Who did it? BMW. The S85. Yes. The 414 horsepower out of 4 liters is the only time anyone has hit 100, who has gone over 100 horsepower per liter. Like Audi did the 414 and the 4.2 liter RS.
Didn't the S54 3.2 liters?
Crossplane V8.
Oh, crossplane V8. Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. Crossplane crank V8. I think only one, it's that BMW S85 from the E90 M3 that has ever significantly beat the 100 mark. And anyway, the last Voodoo V8 was a 5.2 liter with 520 horsepower, so 526. So that one, Ford needed a crossplane crank to get to. And this very compromised motor. I went to a tech preview of that, and they were showing us the intake manifolds, and there was only one throttle and one intake manifold. And the problem with cross-plane crank V8s to make power is that you have uneven firing between the banks. So each bank gets boom, 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 boom.
You get pulses.
Right. And so you can't take advantage of the resonance that you would if it were those pulses were evenly spaced. And so every flat plane V8 that I can think of has two separate plenums that are fuel injected, has two separate plenums with a little bit of a crossover. And so each one is experiencing equal pulses happening at equally spaced time intervals. And there's a crossover to take advantage of a resonance at different resonances at different speeds. The Voodoo didn't. And I was told that the Ford didn't have the money to do a dual throttle setup and dual plenum. So they had to stick with the single, which cost them some power. But what they did was change the firing order to compensate for that. And what that did was add most of the weight back into the crank that should have been gone to balance it, because it was now, instead of a 4-cylinder crank where you have two throws, you have 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So there's not a lot of material in them, getting super nerdy. But probably one of the reasons those engines tend to blow up is because they have a design that is inherently weaker for the crank. But then they also couldn't package equally spaced, equal length exhaust runners. So they get that Chewbacca sound because the exhaust runners are so different left to right. I find it so interesting that the new Coyote Gen 4, which is the Dark Horse motor, is 500 horsepower and has 2 throttles and 2 plenums. Mm-hmm. So I have a sneaking suspicion
they learned some stuff.
They did that and are going to make a
when they make a flat plane version of it, then it's going to be less compromised and more mega and wow, that'll be so exciting. So you're thinking the new GT350 could be just like absolute magic?
I think so. Why the hell else do you go to dual plenums? I'm not an engine intake manifold engineer, but I have a sneaking suspicion they did that for a reason, because it didn't seem...
What an exciting time to be alive.
Ah, really? So,
the Camaro's dying.
And the Challenger and the Charger. Yeah, we're going to have a Mustang for a little while longer.
Super
cool. No, I'm not a Mustang guy. You're definitely not a Mustang guy.
No, but I would own one.
There's a couple of them that I don't.
Yeah,
so
me too.
All I know is that Fox-Body made me feel things that I shouldn't have felt in a car.
Well, glad you've been blowing the cobwebs out. And this has been the Mustang episode of the Carmudgeon Show. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week, potentially, probably.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Bye.